welcome to another episode of Radical Talks. This is a podcast exploring the AI era. We talk about all the innovation happening at the forefront of AI, things like cutting edge research, new kinds of products, and of course, startups. I'm Molly Welch. I'm one of the partners here at Radical. And this week we have a very exciting conversation because we get to talk about one of the most rapidly advancing, quickly changing frontiers in AI, and that's voice synthesis and understanding. If you're like me, you've long had either a Google Home or an Amazon Alexa. You've probably yelled at it over the years when it failed to do all the things you wanted it to do. And then you looked around in 2025 and realized that voice AI is working really well. I don't know how many of you have played with any new products that incorporate some of the latest and greatest in voice, but they are pretty astounding, and we'll have a little bit of a demo on one of them today. We have two fantastic guests to help us unpack this. First, we've got Sanjana Basu, who is one of our partners here at Radical and a dear friend and collaborator. We're very happy to have her on. Sanjana has been instrumental in shaping our firm's investment thesis in the world of voice AI. She's got a really sharp eye for what's innovative and exciting in the space. Sanjana, welcome.
Thank you.
And joining us from the front lines is Arsham Ghahramani, who is the co-founder and CEO of Ribbon AI, one of our portfolio companies here at Radical. Ribbon is pioneering the use of voice agents to conduct interviews for companies, so in the world of recruiting, and they are changing the game in recruitment. Arsham, thank you as well for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Okay, let's get right to it. Sanjana, let's talk about big picture. When we hear the term voice AI in 2025, I mentioned some of the really exciting products that many of us have played with. It's a lot more than the previous paradigm of, our Amazon Alexas and Google Homes. From your perspective as an investor, what does voice AI mean today? What are the core technologies that you're really paying close attention to?
Thanks, Molly. So maybe I will start big picture. What is voice AI or conversational AI, as many researchers in the field have known it for the last few decades? It is really a machine's ability to simulate human conversation by understanding, processing, and generating language. This technology has actually been around for decades, and researchers have been kind of close to breakthroughs in various different points of time. But instead, like you said, what we got was clunky IVRs, weird conversations with Alexa at home. That's my Alexa just heard me. And just
no shade to Alexa. We don't mean to discriminate against her indiscriminately. There were other offenders too, but I hear you. I'm with you. I totally hear you.
Exactly. So that is the kind of experience we've been used to, like zero context, not natural, not intuitive. But what's changed is that the technology has gotten significantly better over the last, I would say, 12 to 18 months. And when I say the technology has gotten significantly better, it is various parts of the technology. So today, the voice AI stack is a cascading architecture of text-to-speech LLMs and then text-to-speech models. And each of these have seen rapid improvements. So at the ASR level, you see improvements in understanding, so cutting out background noise, understanding accents, understanding tone, emotion. And there are various different models in this space that are actually good for each one of these tasks. Then you have the LLM, which obviously taken over, and that has led to improvements in understanding and intent. And then finally, you have text-to-speech. And I think this is where we've seen the most rapid improvement in that models are sounding more natural and more human-like. So that's where the technology is today. And one thing I will say about voice is that why is it important? I mean, it is important because it represents the most natural human interface we know. It is the primary evolutionary communication method we've used for centuries, conveys rich emotional and contextual information, enables, hands-free, eyes-free interaction that integrates seamlessly into daily activities, and is super efficient because it is faster than typing. And today, I use voice for almost everything. I'm beginning to use voice even to kind of write emails, send texts, speak to LLMs. It's honestly a magical experience now and just creates a lot of efficiencies in my day.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point of the reduction in friction that voice provides. Being able to speak to your computer is inherently easier than, typing on a keyboard or into your phone, right? I think there's also something about there's this piece on reducing friction and making it easier to interact with technology. Voice makes it easier to interact with technology. There is also the element from an enterprise perspective that so many legacy industries still run on voice. And Arsham, I'm curious for your take here. I mean, recruiting, this is obviously a core part of how job interviews are done in a range of industries, is through the phone. But then you can also think about things like medical applications, healthcare. There is a whole wide world of businesses where voice is still sort of the primary paradigm of interaction. How have you thought about that in the world of recruiting?
Yeah, so one of the things we realized really early on is if you look at like the average person's resume or you look at that LinkedIn, like it's pretty sparse info. You don't really get a sense of like who they are, what have they achieved, what have they done in the past, who did they work with, right? And then we all intuitively know that just from a 5-minute interview with someone, you get really incredibly rich info about all of those things. Like what's their energy like? Who did they work with? What have they actually achieved recently? What's their like proudest achievement? You can ask all those questions and get a pretty short answer in like under 5 minutes, right? So like early on when we were thinking about Ribbon and kind of ideating, actually, like we just latched on to like how efficient the idea of voice can be and how much information density there is in just like a short conversation. And that was why we went down this road.
Sanjana, you mentioned LLMs taking over everything and this tidal wave of applications for large language models. How have LLMs solved some of the old problems in voice, and what are some of the new opportunities in voice applications with LLMs at their core?
The current voice stack includes LLMs, but LLMs may not be as important in the future that we are moving to, which is speech native models. So speech native models are models that basically process audio directly, and they are on the rise. They have several kind of theoretical advantages over the cascading architecture, which has that LLM step as the intermediate step because it offers lower latency, captures richer contextual information, and there is more natural emotional expression as a result. However, the cascading architecture still dominates in production for various reasons, which Arsham can actually get into because he faces this kind of day to day, and it is also more cost effective now. But to your original question, LLMs have significantly improved the voice experience because of the way it has been able to capture intent better than ever before. I think that is the main insight over there. And that leads to a step that is so critical to capturing speech as well as generating a response.
Really interesting. Maybe Arsham, can you say more about why this cascading architecture has been the right one for Ribbon?
Yeah, so for us, it comes down to control, right? So if you look at like some of the leading voice-to-voice models out there, like I'll just take like OpenAI as the example because I think that was like the splashiest one that came out over the last year or so that a lot of people are aware of. The quality of the voice in a lot of scenarios like really, really impresses people. The end-to-end nature is like pretty useful for certain contexts, but for ours, we really care about control over the synthesis there and like the ultimate experience, right? I'll give you one example. In an interview, the emotion that you show is really important. So let's say you're like doing a job interview, half an hour in, it's really strange if suddenly the AI on the other side starts laughing at you or is being sarcastic. And you do see this with these like speech-to-speech models where they show the wrong emotion at the wrong times. The control isn't necessarily there. But that's a really important part of our experience, right? Like with our voice interviews, you always want to make sure that the candidate feels comfortable, that they're doing their best. You're like setting them up for success. And you can't necessarily do that with this like other type of model that is out there. So that's one of the reasons why we've stuck with that paradigm. Do I think the voice to voice will get there? I think it will eventually. We are like working on versions of Ribbon that actually incorporate that, but the control just isn't there yet.
Sanjana, back to you. So you've also spent a lot of time investing historically in legacy industries like healthcare. With that in mind, are there specific industries, perhaps ones that are sort of surprising, where you're seeing voice applications start to take off or start to gain a foothold, and where those industries are being reimagined with this technology?
I have been surprised by some of the industries where voice AI has totally taken off. For example, healthcare more broadly, which was extremely slow to adopt any sort of technology, let alone AI. We're seeing like rapid adoption of voice AI agents in healthcare for customer service and support, front office, back office, health admin tasks. We've seen it in scribes, which is not like an autonomous voice AI agent, but a core part of the technology involves at least two of the three steps in the cascading architecture, which is ASR and LLMs. Government, we've recently made an investment in Prepared, which is focusing on maybe not government, but the broader kind of emergency services space. Restaurants, another category, car dealerships, another category. Research is being totally disrupted by voice. Market research that companies spend millions and millions of dollars on can be done very efficiently through voice now. And again, Arsham can talk a little bit about that as well.
Okay, Arsham, let's go over to you. So you're in the trenches, you're building with this technology every day. You've been on a very cool journey with Ribbon, which is starting to get pretty amazing adoption, and the product itself is incredible. Tell us a little bit about the origin story. How did you come to this space? How did you decide to build Ribbon? Tell us how it all started and how you got here.
Yeah, thanks for letting me tell this story. So I've been working in AI since around 2014. Started off when I was doing my PhD. And at the time, actually, it wasn't even called AI, right? It was just machine learning. It was like an ugly space. Not that many people were interested in it, really. And I was just interested in analyzing really large data sets to create like positive health outcomes. That was kind of like the crux of my PhD. Started looking at like what was out there, got interested in machine learning, really ran with it. And then, like here I am now. In between that, like worked for a couple of really large scale teams. So like led one of the AI recommendation teams at Amazon, where I just learned a lot about scale, learned a lot about their interesting culture as well, because like Amazon has its own interesting like ML and also engineering culture. And along the way, worked at a startup called Ezra, which was actually just acquired by Function Health a couple of weeks ago. And that's really where the origin story for Ribbon really starts. So at Ezra, I was the head of AI. At the time, we were working on AI models for MRI. And we were as a team, we were growing really rapidly. I was one of the first engineering hires, and then essentially tasked with like hiring out the whole engineering team as well as AI. And we were having to hire a bunch of ML engineers into my team. And that was when I got really close to the head of people and talent there, who's Dave Vu, who is now my co-founder at Ribbon. And we had this shared pain where like I think there was one quarter where we had to hire 8 ML engineers all into my team. And like if you've interacted with a lot of ML engineers or like had to hire them, like this is one of the hardest roles on earth that you have to hire for. Like you're hiring for a really educated person who's super sought after in one of the hottest like ML markets or just like engineering markets in history, especially at that time. And it was just down to Dave and I to do that. And we were like asking each other, like, how the heck are we going to hire 8 of these roles in one quarter and really deliver on everything that we need to? So that was the first time I really ever had to think about like, how do we hire this such a high bar, but also really rapidly, right? It's not only that we have to find these skilled people, but we have to do it in a like insanely short amount of time. And so Dave and I started really thinking about that and like breaking down like what are we actually looking for? What are the skills that we're looking for here? How do we evaluate whether someone is not a good fit as early as possible in the hiring pipeline? Because if we don't, it'll eat up a lot of our time later on and we're not going to be able to actually deliver on these 8 hires. So like all of that really became what we had like a framework of like, this is how Ezra hires this type of challenge, this level of talent. And So Dave and I had this understanding of like a rapid hiring framework, and that was what started the like seed for Ribbon, really. Then like fast forward to around two years ago, we started the company. We spent the first year actually just cooking. Like we had so much tech to build in this space. And so I'll be honest, it was a scary year actually, because in order to build out this essentially like AI recruitment agent that we have now, there were so many pieces. Just one example there, when you actually jump on a Ribbon interview now, there are 7 AI models that are running in real time that end up with that experience that you see and hear. So yeah, that was how we started. Now, I guess kind of just like high level about where we're at. We have over 450 customers now. Most of our customers are in the high volume hiring space. So these are either teams that hire a lot and kind of tend to have lower retention, think like warehousing, large retail, healthcare, or we also work with some of the largest enterprises on earth too. So our typical customer on that side is just a very large company, could be in tech, who just after a certain scale, they feel like they're always struggling to hire. They can never interview fast enough. And so they need some kind of like augmentation or assistance there. And that's where Ribbon comes in. We're a voice AI interviewer that helps teams interview. And so our typical team that we work with, let's say for like each role, might have had somewhere between 500 to 1,000 applicants. They would interview roughly, let's say, around 60 of those 1,000. With Ribbon now, there's no limit, and they can interview all 1,000 and be really sure that they're actually picking the like top talent out of that entire candidate pool. And not only that, but they can do all that faster. So kind of typically the teams that we work with will hire around 50 to 60% actually quicker than they would have without Ribbon.
I want to talk about the product in a more granular way, and I do want to hear a demo, which I think will be the coolest way to actually experience Ribbon. But before we get there, I'm curious to hear a little bit about the market you decided to start in. So you lived the pain point in terms of MLE hiring, machine learning engineer hiring. I think everyone listening to this podcast probably knows what an MLE is, but just in case, that's obviously not high volume hiring, right? These are, as you described, these are very specialized roles, often take quite a while to fill, more specialized searches. You've started somewhere totally different in the segment that you described. Why did you decide to start there? And is that where you want to stay forever? How do you think about the trajectory of where go-to-market will focus over time?
There's like 2 strong reasons why we started there. One was that we just did like a study of all the areas of hiring and understanding like what's the pain index there, right? So like how many roles does each of these areas have to hire for? And then like relative to the size of their recruitment teams. And so that like that high volume hiring space came up as like the highest pain index essentially. So if you look at the typical recruitment team in that space, they're not using a lot of sophisticated tools, but they do want to. They have a really high willingness to. They hire a ton of roles, but they don't have that many recruiters relative to the number of roles that they have. So like one was just thinking about like where can we make the biggest impact in the shortest amount of time? And to answer like the other part of your question, we're not staying there. And we actually have a lot of customers who are outside of that space. We just focus there because that's right now where we can help teams absolutely the fastest. But we have self-serve customers that come to us from like every part of hiring, really. The other part, haven't spoken much about this actually, but there was another kind of like a strategic reason for going after that, which is that if you look at the like world of voice AI, actually AI in general, whoever has the most data for a certain domain essentially almost always wins and always has the best experience in terms of that like AI model. So if you think about voice, whoever has the most voice data in this space will win and dominate and they'll have the best interview experience. And so we were thinking like, how do we get to the point where we have the best voice experience? And the easiest way to do that is just to have the most voice data. And the easiest way to have the most voice data is to see the most interviews. And so that was one reason why we went with the high volume hiring space, is because that's a way for us to create the best experience in this space and then spread that to all the other areas of hiring out there as well.
let's talk about the product. I would love to hear you walk us through the product. Maybe we can hear a demo, talk us through the product and how it works.
Yeah, so the way it works is that a team comes to us, they can self-serve sign up, and within a couple of minutes, upload a job description, and we create an AI recruiter. The AI recruiter manifests itself in the form of an interview link that you can share with any candidate who you want to interview. And then the candidates can interview at their own leisure whenever they want. Could be 1 a.m. They interview. And then after that interview, the recruitment team has the interview kind of stored. They can see some analysis, they see a summary of what happened, and they also see some light scoring as well of that candidate too. So we'd love to show you just one example of an interview that I actually do live now.
Sounds awesome. Let's do it.
Okay, so for this, I've chosen financial analyst role. This is a financial analyst at Ford. And so I'm going to start that interview in just a second.
Hi, I am from Ford Motor Company calling about your AI-powered interview. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Glad to hear that. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. So, thanks for your interest in the financial analyst position with us. I'm excited to learn more about your experience and see if this role could be a good fit. Before we dive in, do you have any questions about how this interview will go?
I don't think so. No, I think I'm ready. Let's go.
Awesome. Let's get started then. Can you tell me about your experience with developing financial forecasts and budgets?
Yeah, so in one of the roles that I worked in previously, I had to create a budget. I'm not super experienced in this space though, but it's something that I'm hoping I can learn on the job.
Got it. Thanks for being honest. What kind of support or resources do you usually look for when you're learning something new like budgeting? And have you had any exposure to forecasting, even if it was just a small part of your past roles?
Yeah, I've done it as part of the current startup that I'm running, but I'm really hoping that this is something that we can learn as we go. What I tend to do, my approach there is I will like use resources online.
That's a solid approach. Learning on the fly and using online resources can really help. Running a startup must have given you some hands-on experience with financial planning, right? Can you share a bit about how you handled forecasting or budgeting there? Any challenges you faced?
All right, so I'll just pause it there. That kind of gives you a flavor of the types of interviews that we can run. I'll add a few things that you might not have seen there as well that you see in our real interviews. Our agent can live research you as the interview is ongoing. And that's exactly what a good recruiter would do as well. They'd have your LinkedIn up, they'd have your resume, they'd be like really thinking about what's the next question that I should ask. That's what we're doing in the background as well. And so as a result of that, you see some really dynamic questions that can happen in these interviews. And we have some customers that actually drive these interviews all the way to 90 minutes. And after each interview, we actually ask the candidate for feedback too. And even with those very long interviews, we see really, really high feedback from the candidates too. And one other aspect for them is that as a candidate, usually if you're interviewing at a company, you can only interview from like 9 to 5, right? Because that's when recruiters are working. With a ribbon interview, that can happen any time of day. And over the last month, actually, we've seen around 25% of our interviews happen between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. local time.
Wow.
So it's like you're able to interview essentially at a time that nobody else would usually be working.
So it just increases your throughput materially, I can imagine, as part of that.
That's right. And it's just way more convenient. Like imagine you're like a single dad who was working the factory floor all day. And in the evening, you were looking after the kids and putting them to bed. Like the first time you're actually available to interview is 11 p.m. But no one can interview at that point, right? So it's just like the level of flexibility that this opens up is huge.
Really awesome to hear the demo and impressive how fluid and natural and kind the interviewer presents. Really, really impressive. I am curious, human conversation is nuanced. Even in this conversation right now, we've been using a whole bunch of industry specific jargon, everything from MLE, which is maybe a little bit of an ML jargon word, or PTS, things that we know, but we might not expect every AI agent to know. How does Ribbon handle things like industry-specific jargon or even things like accents or the normal things that might crop up, interpersonal things that might crop up in a conversation, like a candidate's kind of nervous or something like that? How do you make Ribbon a good interviewer in that sense?
Yeah, I'll start with the accents piece because that's something that is, I guess, dear to my heart because I grew up in the UK, then moved over here. Feel like I have like a mixed accent now, like I'm not even sure where it's from anymore. We actually ran a study on this with one of our customer partners, and with their team, we showed that our AI can understand accents with like higher fidelity across a range of accents. So with this partner, we actually chose 6 different accents and showed that the transcription of our AI is more accurate than their human recruiters. And I think that piece I think is important. What's more important though is that the analysis that we do, like almost all the analysis in terms of scoring and matching, happens after the transcription. And so it means that the accent is not really taken into account there when we're thinking about the candidate. So that's a huge way where you can reduce bias.
Yeah.
So that helps a lot of teams who, honestly, the average recruiter team out there doesn't have a handle on the bias that is introduced from accents and all these things.
Yeah. What about jargon? What about the MLE and TTS type stuff?
Right. So all that's super important because there's no one system that will always know every single bit of jargon, right? So the way that we handle that is we allow every company to like upload their own jargon. So you can upload knowledge base to us. You can also add specific like phrases, jargon, and also ways that you pronounce certain words as well. So we've had companies, where they have like an interesting spelling of a brand name. That's their company brand, but it's like pronounced a different way. With Ribbon, you just upload that. You just tell us exactly how it should be pronounced or what a certain like piece of jargon means, and we'll use that for the rest of your interviews.
Very cool. You mentioned a little bit of a third rail, thorny set of topics that I'd love to get your take on. And that's broadly the ethics of voice AI. In recruiting and machine learning, as Arsham, as you know, someone who's been in the ML world for some time, recruiting has been an area of debate in the world of machine learning around the potential to introduce or exacerbate biases in hiring processes. I'm curious how you think about that in this new paradigm of voice AI, how you grapple with some of those old questions to the extent that 10 years ago, it feels like a long time ago, around the potential for machine learning to exacerbate bias or introduce new kinds of biases into hiring. How do you think about that at Ribbon? You mentioned a couple of ways you think that the product could actually help, for instance.
Yeah, I see a lot of parallels to self-driving cars in the sense that I think we should hold Ribbon to a bar that is 100x better than the existing paradigm, right? So in the same way that when you get into a Waymo, you're really hoping this is at least 10x better than like the average driver who's on the road. And if it's not really acceptable in terms of risk, right? So we hold ourselves to the same. Like I came from a healthcare like AI background. And so we took a lot of the like learnings from that world and applied it here. So one of the learnings there is in the health AI world, if you want to understand if your AI is performing well or not, you essentially run something similar to like a clinical trial. You have matched cohorts with and without the AI, and you look at what is the effect of this AI or this intervention or even a drug on those cohorts of matched demographics and sex. And then you see, is there a negative effect there or is there a positive effect there? And so we've run exactly the same kind of study where with a couple of our partners, actually, we had matched demographics. And we showed that if they use Ribbon versus if not, there's no change in the demographics there. And so we're not introducing any kind of demographic bias. Now, what's interesting though is that a lot of our like customers and partners don't have consistency in their hiring process at all, right? So like depending on which recruiter you like initially interview with, there is a demographic shift and change. And they've seen that with their human recruiters. Whereas if you deploy Ribbon within an organization, you get exactly the same kind of interviews every single time. So you have this really, really high bar of consistency. And so again, I think it's not enough for Ribbon to just be like 10% better. I really do think we have to be 100x better in terms of this consistency and in terms of positive bias there. And so that's the bar that we're holding ourselves to.
To look a little bit into the future, what do you guys think is still hard in the voice AI world? We've talked about all the things that are going right. We heard this super cool demo that I think really underscores the capabilities of the technology today. Incredibly fluent, incredibly performant. What's still hard? What's still unsolved? Arsham, I'm curious maybe for your perspective on this, since you are on the front lines, maybe to start.
One of the areas that we're shifting our focus to it is that like we're really good in a one-on-one interview right now, but we want to do more complex types of interviews too, right? And the next frontier for us is kind of like essentially having an AI assistant there who can take part in a panel interview, understands like all the different nuances of like a multi-person conversation going on there, but then can bring the advantages of the voice AI that we already have, like the instant research that it brings and having full context on the candidate. So I think that's something that like isn't quite there yet, but we're not too far off.
Yeah. Sanjana, what about you? What do you think? What's unsolved?
Since Arsham's taken a little bit of a technology lens as to take a more application lens, I think actually consumer is much harder than enterprise from a voice perspective. We spent the first 2-3 minutes speaking about how poor our experiences were with Alexa.
Or Alexa, we're gonna get in trouble. Someone's gonna get really mad at us. We're really bashing her on this call.
But I think it's just because consumers have a higher bar for the kind of experiences they need. I think consumer has a lot of potential, and consumer is probably the next wave. We're seeing voice AI integrated into AI therapists, into AI coaches, into ads, into film, and much more. People are using voice dictation tools. That's a little bit easier. But I think that consumer applications is where the technology will really be tested as something durable. And that kind of leads to, I think, my big question is how close are we to passing the speech Turing test?
Yeah.
And that measure, I think, will be pressure tested by consumer applications.
It's such a good point. We sort of have this low bar for enterprise voice when you think about the customer service experiences that we've been subjected to in our modern lives. It is a very different thing when you're thinking about something that you use every day in more of a conversational setting versus being in line on your phone for a call center type thing. So it's a great point. Last question. Sandra, you talked about the Turing test for voice. I want to take us into the realm of what may seem like sci-fi, and that's 10 years from now, 2035. I don't know what's going to be happening. So you guys tell me what's happening. Like what will our relationship with voice technology look like in 10 years?
I'm going to take the recruiting world lens on that as well, but with voice, right? So like I think that something that we will change over the next 10 years is that there's a lot of people who are in roles right now that they don't enjoy or is not the optimal role for them. And the reason why they're in that role and not in a different role is because there's this like activation energy. There's like a lot of effort to find that next role that is more optimal. And so they just remain in this like suboptimal job. We are going to drive the time that it takes to find that next job all the way down to a few hours. So right now, like the median role takes around like 50 days or so. I really do think we can get that on the order of a few hours. And that's going to be driven by the efficiency of voice AI and how much more efficient it is to understand a candidate with voice AI. And the other kind of knock-on effects are going to be that instead of having to interview for every single company separately, like most candidates do right now, they'll be able to reuse one single ribbon interview that they do. It'll be like a half-an-hour interview that they do right at the start of when they've decided they want to find that next job. That'll be reused across all the companies they're interested in, and they'll have their next job signed, sealed, and delivered within 4 hours or so. And I think the like knock-on effects across the economy, like in terms of GDP, in terms of net happiness, to be honest, of just people being in roles that they enjoy, for longer and less time in jobs that they don't, I think it's going to have just like a staggering impact on all of us.
Really, really interesting and optimistic take. Sanjana, what about you? Where are we in 2035?
Yeah, so I think another theme that I am exploring is actually multimodal applications and multimodal agents. And I do think that that is the future of AI. Text was everything since ChatGPT released. Right now, it's audio. But there are other senses that have to be activated. And we're going to see that in more and more multimodal applications. So I think the tech stack for voice will be an essential part of multimodal applications that kind of integrate visual and other contextual information to provide like magical experiences. But obviously, as we speak about voice and bringing it back to this discussion, like single modality voice AI systems will thrive independently for tasks that are primarily dependent on verbal interaction. So that's what I see. I'm already meeting crazy companies that are building like digital companions in the home that have like very human-like everything, including voice. And then obviously we'll see more normal enterprise and consumer multimodal applications where voice will be a key part.
Yeah. It's going to be weird. It's going to be wacky. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Sanjana and Arsham, this was indeed very fun and really just a wonderful and insightful conversation. Thank you both so much for joining and sharing your perspectives. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was great to be on here.
And thanks everyone for listening to Radical Talks. If you like what you heard, maybe yell at your Alexa or don't. You can tell us and share with folks in your network and let us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks everyone. And thanks to Sanjana and Arsham. That's all for Radical Talks this week. If you had as much fun as we did, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you for future episodes. See you then.